you adding your voices to that, having faith in yourself and going for it. Today's sermon's a little bit different, so you're forewarned. Nothing odd. I won't make you do anything too strange. It won't surprise you, though, that I'm going to start today's sermon with a story from my own life. I tend to do that a lot. Just a snapshot, really. I do this not because I think that my past is something that should be all that important to each of you, but because I feel that if I can find a way into a theological or a spiritual conversation through a personal experience, then I'm better able to shape what I'm sharing with you in ways that speak to your own experiences, and seeing your own daily lives as worthy of deep reflection. And I'm answering Ralph Waldo Emerson's call in his Divinity School address when he said, "The true preacher can be known by this, that he deals out to the people his life passed through the fire of thought." Now, you may remember from my sermon a few weeks ago on the name of the tree that I talked about graduating from my small plastic orange record player to my father's stereo as I grew older. And about the same time, I passed through the most important rite of passage of my childhood. I got to turn in the little pink card with my name typed on it that gave me permission to borrow books from the children's department of the public library. I turned it in exchange for a brand new yellow card, a card that gave me permission to borrow books from the adult sections of the library. In fact, borrow anything in the library. That was You only have to know me a little bit to know how glorious a day that was. I'm sure there are many of you in here for whom that library card was and still is a prized possession. So now I could borrow anything. I had access to my dad's stereo, and so I would regularly go to the audiovisual department of the library and just browse through the stacks and stacks of records there and bring home anything that intrigued me at all. This is why I have a deep love of early Bill Cosby routines, as well as Tchaikovsky, and why, to my partner's chagrin, I love the Alan Parsons Project and Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. I have a very odd musical taste because of this practice, and it's how I came home one day with the soundtrack for the musical Cabaret. It's a fabulous musical, and one of the guilty pleasures in the show is a little number called Money. Money makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around. It's crass, and it's a crass, jaunty anthem to the importance of money in life. It reduces pretty much everything to the quest for a mark, a yen, a buck, or a pound. And the crassness of the song points to discomfort and confusion we often have around money. It's crass because it's impolite to talk too much about money, and yet we live in a society where our worth and our identity are regularly judged by the amount of money we bring in, how we get that money, and what our net worth is. And the one place we really, really don't want to talk about money is church. There are lots of reasons for this. I think it's partly grounded in the fact that we've been told for all of our lives that the Bible tells us that money is the root of all evil. And talking about money in church, therefore, often makes us deeply uncomfortable, even if we don't come from a biblical tradition. Of course, the book of Timothy actually says, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I'm not immune to this. Notice how long it took me and the long route it took me to get to the topic of today's sermon. Through the library, through Cabaret, though the library will come back in a little while. But because I think that not talking about things openly and honestly can lead to secrecy and reacting to things out of unexamined assumptions and patterns, which is, in a nutshell, I think, a nice summary of every sermon I've preached to you all year. And because you are engaged in your stewardship canvas right now, so that you can make plans for the coming year, because of these things, I'm going to ask us to talk a little bit about money today. And what I'm going to do is share some ideas and thoughts and a practice that might help you think about giving to your religious community or any community that you're involved with in a different way. I'm not going to ask you to pledge a certain amount. That's not my job. I'm not going to ask you to stand up and tell us how much you're pledging. I'm not even going to say to you, give more. Though, of course, we all know that would be a very wonderful thing. As Paisley nods her head. I say this because what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to ask you to do in a nutshell is to stop and look and see what really is. Imagine what could be, and then work to make that imagining possible. That's the bottom line. And I think it's a profound religious practice to be able to do that. Because where and how we amass what worldly goods we have and how we use those things are deeply religious considerations. This is why ethical investing is so important to us. It's why we say that it matters what kind of food we buy and from whom. Not just for health reasons alone, but because we know that how we spend our money has an impact in the world, and we want that impact to be benign at worst and transformative at best. This kind of thinking has deep spiritual roots in the older religious traditions of the world. In the Christian scriptures, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew quotes Jesus as saying, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." And Muslim thinkers also point to the importance of paying attention to our work in this way. The Persian Sufi philosopher and theologian Al-Ghazali wrote, and bear in mind this is his language from his time, "Work for your terrestrial life in proportion to your stay in it, and work for your afterlife in proportion to your eternity in it. Work for God in proportion to your need for God, and work for the fire in proportion to your ability to endure it." Now, that's his theology, not ours. They have different theologies from each other, different commitments than ours and each other. But their central point is still important here to us. Where we put our attention says a great deal about what we value. How we spend our time and our talents and our wealth can say a great deal about who we are. And there are many ways to assess what it is that we're doing. One path is to honestly assess what we're receiving for the work that we do and the costs we pay to do that work. Cost in stress and commuting and necessary downtime. In the 1990s, Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez published a book called Your Money or Your Life. And in it, they asked their readers to calculate the actual amount of money their job is bringing them for each hour of work. And by actual, they mean taking into account what it costs in time and money and stress to actually get to and from work each day, what it costs to dress for work, what it costs to pay for the vacations or medicine or therapy that doing this work makes necessary. All of that. And then to ask the question, is it worth it? Am I trading my life away for what feels meaningful to me? And for them, this is a task that is put into place so that we can assess our choices around employment. That job that pays so much more, but what does it really pay in terms of our lives? And it strikes me as a deeply spiritual task, understanding this, assessing this. It is, in essence, a task that is at the heart of many spiritual practices, especially many Buddhist and Taoist traditions. The practice is engaged in to center the self, to quiet distractions and see what actually is. To wake up, as I said at Easter, to wake up and see. The purpose of many spiritual practices is to wake up. And though it may seem odd, I want to ask us to imagine it as a practice in service of our collective vision for the beloved community, for this community, this congregation. If you're new here and don't have strong ties to this congregation yet, I invite you as I go forward to imagine another community in your heart, something that is true and important to you. Because pledge time comes around and around, or Amnesty International, or the World Wildlife Fund, or the Occupy movement call on us. And we have to make decisions about what and how we're going to give. And we make those decisions in many different ways. And I don't just mean decisions about money. I mean about time and talents and hard work and your heart space too. So please don't hear from me that money is the only thing I'm talking about. All of those things that we give to our communities. I'm not going to ask you to abandon the way you make those decisions, but I want to offer you another process to add to your toolbox, a practice that may surprise you. It's a practice of contemplation, a commitment to see, a practice that I'm going to shape by reference to the song we just sang. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Those three questions will shape how we move forward now. So I want you to get comfortable in your seat again and breathe deeply. I want you to remember as we do this small exercise to hold yourself in love. You may see things in your head or your heart that you think you should feel shame over, and I'm going to tell you, don't. Do your best. I want you to see what comes up when I ask you some questions. I'm not going to ask you to share them with anybody, and I want you to try and put aside critique, and judgment, and shaming, or celebration of yourself, and just see. Where do we come from? What are the things in your life to which you've made commitments? What have you given to those commitments in the past? Where is your passion? Where is your heart in this giving? I'm just going to pause for a moment and let you think. Pause. Remember to breathe deeply as we ask, what are we? What do you have right now? What talents and skills and knowledge do you hold in yourself? What time do you have? What physical abilities do you have? What physical liabilities do you have? What financial assets do you have? What financial commitments do you have? Try to see these without guilt, without self-downing, without shoulds. See what is. Now ask yourself, where is the abundance? Even if it feels tiny, even if it feels fleeting, where is the abundance? And breathe deep gratitude. And where are we going? Now contemplate this community, or other communities, your neighborhood, or your state, your family, the whole wide world, although that's a little large. Focus on one thing. What is your vision for that community? What do you know of the collective vision for this community? Where does your abundance meet that vision? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? I asked you a lot of questions. You can open your eyes now if you wish, or keep them closed if you wish. I asked you a lot of questions, and you may not have answers to all or any of them right now, but those are some questions that you might choose to ask yourself as you go through the process of deciding how to interact with the world with your abundance. My friends, it's all about seeing. All about waking up and seeing what actually is, what's actually going on in our lives and in the world around us. For the children of that wealthy old woman, it was about seeing how their separateness was getting in the way of what they needed. For Al-Ghazali and the writer of the Gospel of Matthew, it was about seeing, about paying attention to where, our effort and our treasure are leading us. And for us here today, I hope it's at least a small glimpse, a small knowing of the way that our own abundances, however fleeting or small they may seem, can meet with the vision of our community. For me, there is a moment like that moment I got that yellow library card, where what I thought I knew and what was actually there shifted so profoundly for me. Theologian Frederick Buechner points to the fact that we are called to the place where our deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. That is the place of our work. We're called to see that place and to re-see it often, to look at what we have, at what we're capable of, and find the hungers and visions of our community. And then, of course, to act. We gain deeper, clearer knowledge, and then we must act. "Oh, disciples," says Al-Ghazali later in the treatise where I got that earlier quote, "knowledge without action is madness." But now that action is grounded in clearer seeing, and action without knowledge, he continues, is void. May our vision be clear. May our actions in the world grow out of deep understanding of where we come from, what we are, and the wholeness and health of our communities and the world toward which we are going. May it be so. Now we're going to sing one more time.